Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter.
Rich, I wanted to let you know, and I've been thinking about this for a while, and how to tell you this, whether I should tell you about your father. And I'll never forget the night we were there in the motel, and I asked him, I said, why did you do it? And Mark looked at me and said, I did it for you. I did it for you, Sean. I came across time, for you. Your father and I didn't know each other very long, just long enough for the act to be completed, but we loved a lifetime. I want you to know that.
Did you trade letters through a mailbox?
Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter.
That was disturbing.
I know, that's a whole different movie.
That made me want to log off.
The things we put up with to do a podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Kelly, you wanted to talk about your newest foray into the literary world and the mounting evidence of your heresy. Go ahead.
Yes, yeah, quite. There's no real growing mountain of my heresy here. I still feel that I am a prophet of truth in talking about the siege of Terra. But at any rate, people mock that which they don't understand. So I finished the Echoes of Eternity yesterday, and started the End and the Death. You guys, can you stop, please? Can we have a serious conversation?
I'm waiting.
No, anyhow, so the Echoes of Eternity, I'd say it took me longer to get through that one than I think some of the other books for multiple reasons. But I really like the book overall. I think it's one of the better ones in the series. And they're all pretty good, except for that one where they had the Imperial Guard on the train thing. Still worst book in the series. If you missed that one, you've missed nothing.
But it was the twist.
I enjoyed that one.
It was the twist. It was the twist that I never got. And I was explaining this to somebody yesterday, Rich, is that at the end of that book, I totally missed the fact that entire Imperial Guard unit was for the War Master. Like I got past that book. I was part of the way into the next book, and I thought, well, what happened to those guys? I actually went and looked it up online, and somebody had explained it online, and then I went back and I read it, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm still disinterested.
I actually had to go back and I listened to it, and then I had to read it in physical form to figure out what happened.
Right.
I will admit it was a really, really quick ending to that whole story, where it was just like, aha, the flag's different than what you thought. And then there was a throwaway line about,
what they needed to do was switch that and make the story quick and the ending a little bit longer, about how they died and screamed and all that.
Suffered.
Yeah.
Should have suffered.
Yeah, for the War Master, and then they get fusion bombed, and that's the end of the book. No, but the Echoes of Eternity was really good, I think, throughout, because it kept presenting the story from the opposite side. So throughout the entire series, you're largely spending a lot of time just, looking at it from the side of the Imperium. And then this one starts with following, a Chaos Apothecary who's, his sort of strained grasp on reality. I thought that was really awesome. And then to do that throughout the book, and certainly it goes back and revisits things with Amit and what's his face, who was a world eater. It does a few things. It got really slow with Vulcan and Magnus the Red. I could have, that whole part should have just sped up, in my opinion. But the rest of it really, really good. What I had a hard time with, though, is the teaser at the end of the book. So the message that's sent in from Rabute that gets intercepted. And I kept trying to figure out, okay, wait a minute, what was the timeline of the other books that I've read from? So the Emperor of Mankind was when they were in the tunnels trying to, secure that. Yeah, the webway. And then after that, Sean, you asked me to read the Emperor's Legion?
The what?
The Emperor's Legion, the one that follows the custodians?
Yeah.
But at the end of that book, isn't that where Rabute shows up? So then I was trying to figure out, well, wait, what's the timeline between all of these books, the Heresy and that book? Because, they
about
say that
10,000 years.
Because Rabute said, I think, and I have to go back and check it, but I think he was like, I'm 1 Terran week away or something. Just hang on. And I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, that's got to be the longest bloody week ever.
Yeah.
If it took that long. I mean, or Rabute's horrible at telling time.
Well, the end and the death kind of explains how a lot of that works. You know, what's going on.
Sure.
So it dives into that a good bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's chronometers are off, and time seems to have no particular meaning at the moment. Yeah. Okay. That was one part that I thought was a little odd. Really led me to believe that Rabute's not as great as everybody thinks he is. You know.
No, it's just that
I don't disagree with that.
he just happens to be one of the only Primarchs left. So, you know, who's there to hold him accountable? Dusty old Emperor? He's not saying shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, it's only a matter of time before your chaotic war bands take over and show us what the true meaning of love and Christmas is in the Imperium.
Well, no, because if I ran a Chaos Warband, I would bypass Earth altogether as meaningless and insignificant.
No, Kelly, if you ran a warband, very quickly you would become disillusioned, pissed off at your god, and become a Chaos Spawn. because you angered him.
Teach a man to build a fire, you warm him for a day. Set a man on fire, you warm him for the rest of his life.
That's right.
That's Kelly's philosophy.
I could see Kelly like following Nurgle for some reason and then getting really angry at Nurgle and taking him to task for being too filthy.
I've never appreciated Nurgle.
No, I know. That's why it would be so absurd.
If I followed Chaos, it would be Khorne, and that would be
Khorne.
it.
That I can see. Yeah.
Yeah.
That follows.
Very straightforward.
Yeah. Simple. Yeah. Slaanesh is too weird, and Tzeentch just doesn't make any sense. It's a big bird thing. It's dumb.
Yeah.
Khorne is the only one that seems to have their crap together.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? The whole thing?
Yeah. Not really.
What gave you that impression? The whole thing with Angron?
No, it's just pretty straightforward,
He
you know.
seems nice.
Angron,
it's pretty straightforward. But the Angron facing off against Sanguinius was a phenomenal section of the book. I thought that was really well done. Impressive throughout. I really, you know, began to respect Sanguinius a bit more than I have out of some of the other books. And frankly, he's one of the better Primarchs in my opinion. But just to watch him at the end, at the final defense of the, or read through, you know, sort of that final defense at the Eternity Gate, really, really super impressive. As were the Blood Angels as a whole, you know, Amit and Zethon and the whole crew and the Cyber Monkey, you know, yeah.
Sounds like
good old Ark and Land.
Sounds like they should be on a deserted isle, doesn't it? With their little cyber monkey.
Professor and Marianne.
Living out of coconuts. Yeah.
I appreciated the cyber monkey. I thought it was a nice little.
It's just the way you said it. It sounded funny.
It was a nice little joke throughout.
So I'm glad you got to this. Oh, go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
Do you remember I was saying I really liked the stuff with Sanguinius in there? I really liked how he did that. And Sanguinius saying, "I don't want to be here." You know, and you know the speeches that he had there and all. I thought it was really well done. I thought Aaron Dembski-Bowden did an excellent job at writing all of that stuff, and I've listened to that book a few times because of how he wrote for Sanguinius and his impending fate. You know, and how he's dealing with the whole thing. That's the other layer to it that I thought was pretty cool. Was that you understand how difficult this is for him because he knows in the end, spoiler mark, in the end, he's going to die. You know?
What?
Yeah.
There's a really famous piece of artwork.
Why should I bother finishing the books now?
Yeah.
So I have to ask Kelly, though, did you not find the beginning of the book where you actually saw what Khorne was all about when the Legio Audax Warhound Titan dragged the Reaver Titan down walking up the mountain, the most metal thing ever. When we're slipping, fire the Ursus claws, and they pulls the other Titan down and clambers over his broken corpse. Oh, so good. So
Yeah,
good, so well written.
it's phenomenal, and even when Angron meets his end at the hands of Sanguinius, and all the world eaters turn on everybody. I mean, at that point, it just becomes a free for all.
Too.
That was great.
I also like the fact that when Sanguinius finally ended Angron there, that Angron's whole call it a revelation at that moment, his response. I love the fact that he made it secret. That even though that was such a momentous moment, such an incredible occasion, no one else heard it. No one else heard it. No one else is going to remember it. It was just him and Sanguinius, and I thought that was really cool. That was amazing.
Is there anybody alive to remember it?
Well, yeah, because remember afterwards, that's why everybody went bananas, is because everybody was watching the whole thing up top, and then as soon as that happened, they lost their grasp on sanity and started their berserker crap. But yeah, there was a lot of people who saw it, but because they were so far above everyone, no one could hear it. No one knew what happened or anything. And I thought that was really cool that he wrote that in there like that, because it would have been so easy to make it part of the story, part of the fabric of the continuum. Instead, it's something no one's ever going to know. And I thought that was really cool how he did that.
I agree. I think the way Mr. Dembski Bowden wrote the book in total was, I think he's one of the better authors that have touched on the subject, right? I mean, the way he treats the subject line, the way he goes through the plot, and the way it develops is really good. Granted, a little long-winded on the Vulcan Magnus bit, but
see, I like the Magnus Vulcan thing. I did. I like that.
I found myself growing frustrated with Vulcan, though.
No,
I mean, because there's the initial
Vulcan
series of like Magnus killed him a million different ways.
Yeah.
And you're going through that. But then there's that moment where, okay, Magnus is on the ground and Vulcan is going to swing the hammer, but he hesitated, right? And he even says he hesitated. And I'm like, well, you're just not a good Primarch if you hesitate. You're not a good servant of the Emperor of mankind.
Vulcan has a bit of humanity that a lot of the Primarchs have lost. Even the ones that are loyal, Vulcan still retains his connection to human beings, which a lot of the guys it fades from them as they progress. Whether they're loyalist or traitor, their connection to humanity starts to fade. And Vulcan, for whatever reason, he was built in such a way that he always. It's why the Salamanders are famed for being like the saviors of humanity, the best legion, because they care about human beings more than the others.
That was that was one of the short stories that was really cool. Was Vulcan, when he was first found, and I think it was Ferrus Manus who was there with the Emperor, and asking him, well, what's his purpose and all that, and the Emperor told him he's supposed to remind you of the most important lesson, your humanity. And Vulcan doesn't seem to care so much about glory and accolades and all of that. He's more empathetic, much more empathetic, much more thoughtful because of that. And I think, in my opinion, him and Sanguinius are tied for the best, because they both have a humility that the other ones, not that the other ones don't have, but they're not afraid of it. Sanguinius and Vulcan seem to really embrace that humility. And the other ones either don't want to have it or are afraid of it. Like Horus back in, I know it's one of the books you hadn't read, Kelly. It's one of the first 3. When Horus is made War Master, and he's stabbed on the moon of Davin, and he's laying there sick. He's talking to, I think it was Mercedes. He's talking to her, and he confides to her, says, it should have been Sanguinius.
Yeah,
I'm not good enough. Yeah. I'm not good enough. It should have been Sanguinius that was made War Master. And then afterwards, he's all freaked out because he, told somebody that inner secret. And I always like that part of Horus's vulnerability, and I like the focus that they then put on Sanguinius being, that particular Primarch. And not all the writers did a good job with that. it seemed like Aaron Dembski Bowden and Dan Abnett were the ones who really did the best with exploring that part. And Vulcan is like, they're one of the two that are in that category, you know. And I think Jagatai would be probably third, maybe, on that list for you know, having humility and humanity. He seems a bit more thoughtful, but I think he does have I think he does, though, have a good bit of, you know, glory hound in him, though, as well.
Yeah, he's impulsive that way.
Yeah,
he's
which
a
isn't a
show-off.
bad thing. You know, it's not a bad thing. It's just, you know, yeah, I don't think he has as much as they do. But I loved what they did with Sanguinius. If you get a chance to read the Fury of Magnus, it'll give you a bit more insight into that conversation. That's what made it so cool for me, because they actually reference it in that, you know, battle at the bridge. You know,
I'm pretty sure in the next book, that conversation you said between Mercedes and Horus, I think they reference it in the End of the Death, that he comes back to it when he's remembering.
Yeah.
I think he references. I think he says, you know, I would have picked Sanguinius if it was up to me.
Yeah, I don't know if you've gotten to that part yet, Kelly. You're still at the very beginning, right?
Yeah, literally at the very beginning.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Would you now at the very beginning? I remember the beginning, the introduction. Have you gone through the introduction or no?
There's just that spiel, that monologue from Samus that I just got through.
Okay, so that's the part I was talking about. Yeah, I liked how that was written too.
Yeah, no, I mean it's good. I mean, it's an interesting perspective on things. It reminded me a little bit where he's talking about the insignificance of Earth, right? Where he's talking about that. It reminded me a little bit of, and this is a crappy comparison, I apologize, but it reminded me of the pale blue dot thing that Carl Sagan wrote about, you know, sort of, this is where everything you know and ever have known exists on this tiny little blue dot, you know.
Yeah.
It really puts it in perspective. But I was happy to see Samus back. You know,
and I like Samus better than Carl Sagan. So
I'm not a fan. I'm honestly not. I'm not a fan of Samus just because he's kind of like the Deus Ex Machina. Even though he's like
Sagan.
the titular character.
I'm the one gnawing on your bones. I'm the one walking behind you. Carl Sagan is here.
Billions and billions of Imperial citizens.
No, but I thought the book was really good. Mark, you really did have to read faster, but it's
Mark,
really
what were your thoughts on Echoes of Eternity?
I will let you know when I have or I'll go back and listen to this podcast, and they will give me my thoughts.
Yeah. I do actually have a question, so Mark can participate. So, is your impression of the Primarchs that we have being a little bit ahead of you? But do you differ from those so far? Because you're in Warhawk, which is just a book behind the one we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But do you find that you know, Sanguinius is as admired as I have a little bit? Sanguinius, I don't know. He just seems to be that kind of tragic character that I like the way he's written, but I find him to be a little annoying at times. But I understand that's because of his prescience. You know, his prescience kind of cripples his ability to enjoy the moment. But how do you feel about the Primarchs? Like, do you think that like Vulcan and Sanguinius are, you know, all the bee's knees, or do you find them there's other ones that you like better?
I'm not really. I don't hero worship any of the Primarchs. To me, they're characters in the story, and they're, you know, I want to hear the story, not hear about this Primarch or that Primarch that I'm particularly interested in. I feel the need to say that, boy, Sanguinius is great. I love him so much right now. But I mean,
no, you're on the right track.
I'm watching him. It's cool. I'm you know, I'm in a spot right now where Mortarion is saying some things, and I'm like, oh, I've got his model up on my shelf, ready to be put together to go in my Death Guard army. So it's you know, I get interested in the ones that I actually, you know, might have some interaction with on the game side. But no, like I couldn't name them all. To me, they're characters in the story, but there's a lot of characters in these stories. So you know what I mean? It's like hearing about an Imperial Guard guy or some Space Marine guys or a Primarch. They're all characters in the story, and I'm digging them. So I don't necessarily want to hear about the Primarchs, because I'm just as interested in what some of these, you know, other characters are doing, if that makes sense.
bear in
that
mind,
Imperial Guardsman.
I love the Imperial Guard.
right. Bear
They're
in mind,
awesome.
this is the guy who was happy to hear about the troops on the train.
Love the troops on the train. That was one of my favorites.
So here's a serious question for you, Mark. So do you find yourself at any point, and I found myself, and I think Kelly would agree with this, I know Sean will not, I found myself sympathizing with the Trader Primarchs at different points, just because I was looking at their points of...
Why wouldn't I?
Wait a second.
Because of the eye. No. I'm being only half serious, but with that part. But there we go. So there it is. I knew it. But no, I found like Mortarion in particular. You know, I could see their points of view while faulting them for their weakness. You know, they all. Oh wait.
Okay. No, he's waiting for you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, it's waiting.
You were getting particularly heretical with your understanding of their.
I know.
Their point
well, no,
of view.
I'm asking if you find, Mark in particular, if you find yourself sympathizing with like Mortarion, knowing that where his backstory about where he came from and how he got to the point that he's at, and the moment of weakness which damned him and damned all of them really, except for maybe Fulgrim. I think Fulgrim was always down with it. You know, you find yourself sympathizing with him at all, or do you just like, nah? They're just
Well, I don't know about sympathizing is the word I'd use, but I really do like how they're giving us these different perspectives. Because it's really easy to look at, you know, the forces of chaos and go, oh, they're the super evil bad guys, and dismiss them. But like I was just listening to, you know, one little part where one of the guys is one of the Trader Marines. He's like, yeah, I don't even hate them. I just find, you know, I like fighting and I find that this is interesting, you know. And he's like, oh, should I have said that out loud kind of thing? And he's like, I don't worry about, you know, like some of them are not hardcore chaos god worshiping things.
There's
they're
quite
just
a few of them like
they're
that,
caught. I know
actually,
quite a few of them are, but I like that they're giving that nuance where some of them are just caught up in the
that's what I was
in the war.
That's what I was saying, is there's quite a few who aren't the
right
chaos worshiping, you know. Abaddon's a good example of that.
Yeah.
You know, he's you know, really not a fan of chaos. He just, you know, he loves Horus, and you know, so he's down with whatever Horus is doing.
Yeah.
But that's also where, and I know you guys hate it. I know Sean and Mark hate it. That's where it's heresy. That's where I'm looking at. This is all really part of a problem, sort of created by the Emperor, right? Now, granted, I know that there are certain aspects of it that he didn't control. He didn't mean for the Primarchs to get scattered hither and yon and be affected by the forces of chaos.
He didn't mean yon, but he meant hither.
Okay, but you know, there's that element of it almost seems like desperation on the Emperor's part to try to get them back and try to make use of, you know, sure, the tool has become slightly perverted in a way, in as much as all of these Primarchs now have some sort of, you know, they're bearing some sort of scar, some sort of taint from what he originally intended. But he's still thinking, I'm gonna take these and make use of them. And at the end of it, I mean, look at what's happened. I mean, is that the majority of humanity has died. I do think that it's interesting to look at the other Primarchs. I'm with Mark. I don't know if it's necessarily sympathy, but I can certainly, I mean, I can understand, I guess, is how I'd put it, as I can see sort of the primrose path that they were led down, because nobody ever turns vile and evil on a dime, right?
I don't know. I got a couple of ex-wives that I think I would.
You know, that there's it's sort of a path of little minor deviations that then lead you into this world where you find yourself stuck.
I think it's like that for some. I think there's that's the, like we've always said, that's why it's so well written, because there are some that do actually, they're like, no, I like this. I like where we're going with this, and we're gonna go all the way. And then there's others, like you're saying, that are, it's small incremental steps, you know, that lead them down whatever path, the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th fold path that they're on. But, you know, I find it's just the strength of the writing that they could show those differences. And even with the loyalists, you see the same thing. There's some loyalists that have doubts. You know, some of the loyalists do have doubts. And they remain loyal.
Look where the Emperor has led you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Terra's under siege, and half the legions have turned traitor. I could understand having some doubt about your upper echelons of leadership. And let's be honest, the Emperor is nowhere to be seen. Right? It's not like he's out there leading the battle and defending the Imperium. He's
gone to his happy
the people
place.
out there doing
retreat.
the thing are like, where is he? Oh, he's hiding in a bunker somewhere while we're out here fighting off, Titans and legions. And
the knowing nod. Mm-hmm. Well,
but again, I gotta hand it to the writers. Like I say, it would be, I think, easy to characterize all of the Chaos guys as just bad, super evil, and all of the Imperial guys as heroic and amazing, and go. But they haven't done that. And again, the appeal of the entire story of the Horus Heresy is that is such a tragedy. And they do such a good job of, you see kind of what it almost could have been, and it isn't. It goes another way, right? And I think that's one of the things I like about Game of Thrones. Like, you see where things could have gone one way, but nope, they cut Ned Stark's head off and it went in a different way. Or, oh, we could have done this, but nope, they decided to do something else, and it just has gone a different way. And you can see the tragedy because we're outside of it, looking in, going, oh, if only they'd done this, or if only they hadn't done that. And so that's one of the things I just like about the entire series, is how tragic it is.
I was thinking they gave George R.R. Martin a giant sack full of money and a bunch of RC cars, and he started getting not interested in what he was doing. But I mean,
right? But you can see on the books he did write how you could see it go in a different way. Like if people were sane and not selfish, they'd go, oh my gosh, this danger up north of the wall is the danger. We need to put all this pettiness fighting over some chair aside, and
it wasn't really
help
all
the
that
Night's
dangerous.
Watch.
You just have to go stab the Night King in the neck.
Well, yeah, we be a 14-year-old.
Yeah,
we got
a 14-year-old girl
north of the wall.
that giant threat kind of fizzled
My
out.
one weakness.
Yeah.
6,000 pages
I'm
later.
no man. It was done so much better.
Don't corrupt
George R.R. King. George R.R. King.
That's great. If I ever get to see Tolkien in the afterlife, I'm going to punch him. What was that for? You know what you started.
All right, you're right.
All right, you're fair.
It's worth one.
Going back to the book, I'm curious about your opinion on this. I feel like Zephon, as they wrote for him in this book, that he was different than how he was presented in the initial, what was it, the Emperor of Mankind, where they're fighting in the webway. Now maybe it's just,
Master of Mankind.
Master of Mankind, where, but maybe he was just feeling sorry for himself in Master of Mankind, and that's why he played the character differently.
Yeah, his character went through an arc where he started off feeling, like you said, sorry for himself, bitter, that he's no longer this being he thought he was.
Right.
And then he goes through, which I liked. I liked that in Echoes of Eternity, I loved how he wrote for his relationship with his thralls, and how that, changed as he's going through there, to the point where he threatens Arkin and says, you're going to try to keep them alive, or I'm going to beat you to death with my own hands.
You gave
that.
Right. That was brilliant.
That was really cool, because his character, like you said, he'd never paid attention to them before, and feeling that shame was, I thought, really well written character development. For a character like Valrak. Remember, I was telling you about that dude saying Space Marines would make a horrible, first project because they're all robotic and all the same and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. This is a perfect example. Like Kelly was saying, you have both sides, the chaotic side and the loyalist side, that have these really intricate, nuanced stories behind them, and being able to explore that was really well done, especially in Echoes of Eternity and in The End and the Death.
I don't think any of the Space Marines are robotic. I
don't think so either.
They all have their own individual motivations. I mean, they're loyal or not. I mean, Abaddon has his, and Ahmed has his, and
as a matter
Zephon,
of fact, I'll be eager to see your feedback, Kelly, on a specific part of End in the Death, because of what we're talking about. But yeah, wait till you get there.
Yeah, you're going to get to some really interesting stuff with the Blood Angels, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it when you get there as well.
Is there a moment where they explain how the Emperor is not the causation of this major fucking problem?
I mean, that's the whole series, but
Kelly, they could write that out 100 times, like Jack.
You never believe it.
In right, him in The Shining could be every line in the book. It's not my fault. It's not my fault, and you would hate him anyway. So it would make no difference.
I want to see the trial of the Emperor, where there's evidence presented on both sides, and humanity decides his fate.
He'd just pop your head.
Get Tom Cruise in there. You can't handle the truth.
Kelly, I'll be honest, you couldn't live on either side. The Chaos God would turn you into a spawn because you would piss him off so much, and the Emperor would just pop your head.
He'd definitely be one of those, what do they call them? The Black Shields, the unaligned Marines. Just like goes across the galaxy as a mercenary, serving no one but himself.
Yeah, not even a mercenary. Because not even a mercenary. He would be a lone figure. I'm not sure exactly who you would be. I would have to figure out who you would be. There's like this sweet spot of time and place where Kelly would flourish as a character in 40K. And then that would be it. And then the rest of it would be tragic, ending because of.
Yeah, pretty much. I agree with that.
It's very much, like I was saying about the doubts amongst the loyalists. I tend to put and sad as it is for me to say this, I put Rogal Dorn in that. He's got a lot of doubts about himself, about his purpose, about his mission, about what he's doing. And it's interesting. You're going to see that in the next, even though he's one of my favorite Primarchs, he seems a little lost in his own.
Well, he's one of those. Yeah, he's one of those I was talking about who, to me, seems like he's afraid of his humility. Yes. He doesn't want to. He would see that as a weakness. Can't have it. Doesn't have time for it. So he puts up the stony face, and this is how it is. And everybody's got to live up to that same belief and standard.
Sure, but that would be that would be sort of the clock that's ticking, because you can put up a face, you can put up a facade and put it behind that, but that's what's going to start eating away eventually. But I don't know that any of the Primarchs really live long enough for that to eat away completely.
Yeah,
I mean, they keep coming back, so
yeah, and the Lions,
they got to sell more figures, man. So it's always there.
The Lion's a good example of that. Even Gilliman, when he came back, he's different essentially than he.
Oh, you're back.
There you are. He had
I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I don't know either. But you didn't even say anything heretical.
No.
I think it was Mark signaling that he's done with this conversation.
It might have been.
Gilliman had some character development. He's become more realistic since his return.
In what way?
What's that?
In what way?
Well, he has there's a lot of compromises he's making and a lot of things he's doing that he never would have done before. And there's a lot of realistic viewpoints that he has since the end of the war and before he went into stasis, that now he's trying to be super cautious and careful about how he does this. That never would have been him before. Him before would have been, this is how we're doing it. This is what it is. Yeah. This is the way it's done. It's always worked. This is how we're doing it. Now he's just, super cautious.
He had a lot of hubris killed out of him. It's like him going with Fulgrim and going at it. I mean, he had a lot of it just kind of beat out of him, literally.
Yeah.
Which is interesting for a purely logical being, supposedly.
Yeah, and I think him failing to be there to save the Emperor, I think him failing to do that was a big deal too. And
everybody else showed up but Rabute.
Well,
there's a bunch of them.
We'll wait and you know, for you to finish the story and everything, because there's a lot of stuff in there. But the lion had a great arc so far too. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the other ones as they bring them back and go forward. And that's where, you know, Mark, I actually do dig hearing about the Primarchs and hearing about their individual stories, because as goes the parents, so goes the children in this story, you know, and they have a huge impact on them. And it's kind of cool seeing how these beings who were made kind of like the Emperor with all this power and all this thrust on them because of it, you know, well, you're this, you must be. How do they handle it? And Lorgar is an example, you know, his story. And I always found him, he's one I never liked. He's one I never liked.
He's the biggest problem in the universe.
Well,
I mean, you shouldn't like him.
Yeah, but deceitful from like the very beginning. You know, deceitful on a very fundamental level, and you know, just strange. Conversely,
no insult to our fan. He has a very womanly spite in him that is, it's like, you did this to me and I'm just never going to forgive you. Never. It's like everything I do from now on is because of this one thing that happened, you know, because I got one censure and that was it. And do
you think women are unforgiving?
They can be, yes.
Do you think
absolutely.
Women are unforgiving?
Yes, they hold grudges.
I object on behalf of our fan.
I did say, no offense to our fan, but I do find that the male paradigm, you know, there tends to be like, that shit doesn't really matter anymore. Where I found with the females in my life, stuff gets held on to, man. it comes back to haunt you.
Gets remembered.
Yeah. And Lorgar seems to have that kind of sensibility where it's like, oh, you did this to me that one time. You know, it's the genesis of everything, of the whole wrecking of everything that happens afterwards was Lorgar's spite. You know, and his word bearers reflect that because they used, what did they use to infect the galaxy? They used the word, you know, the imperial religion. They turned the worship of the Emperor into a religion. It started there.
You know, I really think that Lorgar got not just the charisma, you know, of the Emperor being able to, you know, go out and change people's minds and all that, but I think he also got the patience and planning that the Emperor had, the long-term patience, and no need for, you know, everybody knowing I did it. He's got an eye on the goal, and this is what he's going to do, and he's going to do everything as subtly and as carefully as he needs to, as long as it takes to be able to get what he wants. You know,
he's a very
how much of that is the Emperor, though? Because as we've seen in some of the other stories, like with Jagatai and others, they're heavily influenced. I mean, they were scattered at a very young age into these other reaches of the universe. They're raised on these other planets. You know, Angron, for example, you know, is a slave on this planet. And you saw how that worked out with him, is that the Emperor pulls him out of that, and he never forgave that. You know, and Jagatai heavily influenced by sort of the culture that he's in. So, you know, the Emperor created them, but how much influence does the Emperor have on them? I mean, he's that father who shows up after you've grown up and become famous, and he's like, "Oh no, you're my son. Come hang out with me." And I don't get it.
The difference between Angron and Lorgar.
Well, what don't you get in that comment, Sean? What don't you get in that comment?
Well, let me say
because it's like somebody wins the lottery and then everybody comes out of the woodwork and says, "Oh no, I'm part of your family," something like that.
Yeah, but you just said how much of that can be laid at the Emperor's feet because they were kidnapped, and then in the same breath,
how much of their development and personality, how much of their personality, can be laid because Jagatai as who he is was influenced. And Sean, I know you don't like to be interrupted because you want to be right, but Jagatai is who he is because he was raised on the planet that he was raised on, right? No, certainly the Emperor came in and said, no, you got to be part of this greater plan.
You're 100% right, Kelly. You are. You're 100% right.
No, now you're just being childish.
No, I'm
not. Because Sean, I grew up with you. This is how you argue.
So
I disagree with you. No, you're right.
Aren't we all the way we are based on the planet we grew up on?
Brought up in had a huge impact on who they are.
Now,
Each of them talks about their fathers they had on the planets, the friends they had, and all of those things that made them. So before you get all bent out of shape thinking I'm making fun of you or doing something weird, I can also be very honest with you and tell you straight up when you're right.
And I disagree with part of that, just because I think that the Primarchs are all shards of the Emperor. They're all built purpose-minded, right? So regardless of where they landed, that did influence how they developed, but at the core of their being, they had a certain purpose that they were going to cleave to. Lorgar was meant to spread that kind of propagandistic, charismatic word. He was never the best fighter. He was never going to be the best fighter, but he did have the ability to sway other people's minds.
I think that's where Chaos comes in, because Chaos knew what facet of the Emperor they were supposed to be, and so put them in a specific culture so that they were trying to pervert that the light that Primarch was supposed to be through the lens of whatever chaotic situation they were put
they weren't dropped by accident on random planets. They were chosen planets.
Like each one like Conrad Kurtz is a great example. To get back to what you were saying, Kelly, he was taken to a planet that was just awful. And because it was so awful, so just out of control evil and all of that, this guy who could have been along the lines of somebody like Sanguinius suddenly becomes this, I don't know if you'd say psychopathic, sadistic.
No, he's psychopathic.
He's definitely sadistic. Well, I don't know. He's got this weird care, not care thing, right? He's definitely sadistic, but bent, right? Psychotic.
Yeah.
And
he's got
but you can't say he's having delusions because he's seeing what's going to happen.
He's definitely he's taken his idea of what's right to the extreme, that I'm right and everyone else is wrong. Therefore, I'm good.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
wrong is not.
Well, he was of the opinion that whatever was bad was going to happen. He was shown those two.
He was seeing the future.
This happens or this happens. This is what will happen these two ways. And he's just because of where he was raised, he just figured, well, it's always going to end up bad. So why not just figure it's going to end bad and adjust accordingly?
All of the Primarchs, had they been raised in the crucible that the Emperor was preparing for them, I think would have turned out to have been useful to humanity. The fact was that they were taken and scattered, and like Sean is saying, put in places where they would have maximum perversion of of their nature. The ones that were lucky didn't.
In that book, Fury of Magnus, I'll go ahead and spoil it for you because you're already past that point in the storyline. But in the Fury of Magnus, Magnus goes to the area of the palace where the Emperor was going to raise the Primarchs. Yeah. He has the area set up for where the Primarchs are going to be raised and how they would have been brought up and what they would have been made. Instead, they weren't brought up in that area. They were brought up in, this other thing Chaos set up for them, so that it was their effort to try to pervert what they were, and that was the result.
They were always meant to be contained until they were ready. And that was the thing, is they were taken before they weren't cooked. they were uncooked. They had all the potential and none of the experience. So where they got thrown in these random spots, it did not allow them, the ones that developed the quote unquote right way, it was only fortune that allowed them to get there. I
think rather than baked in a temperature controlled oven, they were cooked on an open wood flame out like on a camping trip. So it was this very rough cooking, because ultimately they did all end up becoming a fine meal, but it was prepared in a less exacting way, I think is what you were trying to say. Yes?
Actually, that's a fairly good analogy.
It's a fine analogy, but it's a little bit more, that's far more thoughtful than I was being. I was thinking that, just the mechanics of it, had they remained under the Emperor's control, whether you like the Emperor, like Kelly would say, well, the Emperor would have misused them to abuse humanity,
No,
you might say that.
I don't know if I would say that, but go ahead. Finish your point, please.
Well, my point is that since they were taken before they were ready, they were just cast to the winds, and that's the nature of chaos. So it makes perfect sense that they kind of threw them out like dice on a battlefield, right? Like this one rolled a 6, this one rolled a 1. You know what I mean?
And see, I think chaos from the beginning just knows what it's about. It knows it's not about winning. It's not about winning, because in order for chaos to succeed, which doesn't have anything to do with win or lose, they still come out on top. Is they just have to deviate it just ever so much, just a slight amount.
They don't always come out on top because they're fighting with each other. That's the thing. The problem, and you see this as the books go on, and you'll see this very much in the End of the Death. They could win if they could just get out of their own way. They can win pretty easily, actually, but they can't.
But that's yeah.
They fall apart because they're chaos. They have
you know where they describe the Chaos Gods pretty good is in Cypher. I just finished that book, Cypher, Lord of the Fallen, which was actually pretty good. I like that. And in there, he talks about the Chaos Gods and what they are and what the demons are and that sort of thing. And I thought his explanation in there was actually pretty good.
Because I think largely from my perspective, and this is the thing, the Emperor lost very early on. When he lost the Primarchs, right? When he lost the Primarchs, when they're scattered about, the whole plan became disrupted. At that point, the seed for the heresy begins, right? Because the Emperor now has to go find them, bring them back. And in some cases, they don't want to come back. And in other cases, they'll follow, but there's large doubts. And we even saw that in the back and forth with Sanguinius and the Emperor when he showed up. And he's like, do you promise these people will be left alone? Is that it's now become a negotiation. And that's where the Emperor, what he saw was, he said, okay, here's this thread. And I know if we can follow this thread, humanity will survive. If we don't follow the thread, it's all going to go off the rails. And the thing is, it went off the rails early. And that's sort of the tragic aspect of the Emperor, is you see him still trying to achieve something. It's almost like he can't accept that the achievement is no longer possible. And that's sort of the tragedy of humanity in 40K.
I have to give you credit, Kelly. Your unrelenting criticism of not letting the Emperor off the hook at any point is refreshing. Very good. You are unrelenting in your thoughts about the Emperor, which I find fascinating. I really do.
The Emperor's trying to get this whole humanity thing to survive. And chaos really just, all it had to do was just pervert it a little bit, and it did. It did. And so, I mean, there's
fault, is that humanity's fault? He didn't make humanity.
No, but he made the Primarchs, and then he appointed Horus as the War Master. I have to say that does carry some weight. And altruistic as the intent may have been, all we're left with is to look at what the aftermath is. And now you're left with a universe where there's nothing but war, right? It's the whole tagline for the game.
See, it's funny because I think you think that the Emperor actually, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you judge the Emperor on a scale that he always knows what he's doing. He doesn't. He doesn't always know what he's doing. He even says at one point at the end of Master of Mankind, I don't know what's next. I don't know. Like, he actually admits it. But he has to, his place as the Emperor, he has to hold it together. He has to at least put on the face that, like, you got to trust me, because if he doesn't, the whole thing falls apart regardless. But I find it interesting that, man, you are just on him, which I find very, you're very consistent. And I'm curious to see when, because, I was very much of the same thought until I got further enough along in the lore that I was like, all right, I'm starting to see where Sean is coming from with his ideas on the Emperor. But I'm still, it's like the scale, like right now, the Emperor, I'm more up on his side, but it could easily, depending upon how he's written in the future, it could easily just go right back the other way.
Sure.
But you're very much just like, no.
Well, there's a hill to climb, right? There's a hill to climb. Because he does represent sort of that figure that I will be the one that saves everybody. And so there's a little bit of like, wait a minute, you're going to save everybody? How are you going to save everybody? I mean, and look at what you've constructed. Has it really ever saved anybody? Or are you just expending souls in pursuit of some vainglorious end?
Oh, just wait. It gets better.
So, I mean, I mean, there's a steep hill for the Emperor to climb, but it should be steep for somebody who declares themselves as the Emperor of mankind. You know, you're a perpetual who's been around for thousands of years and you haven't put this one together. You created two sons who can kind of see into the future and see outcomes, be it, Conrad or Sanguinius. Never thought to say, just kind of put it to them and, hey, what do you see? You know, I mean, there are opportunities here for the emperor to change course and do something different. But the way the writing seems to go is that he's just hell bent on this one thing because it's this thing. But I think even in this moment, when you said he said he doesn't know, and there was even that conversation with who was he had the conversation with on the beach? I forget the name of the custodian.
Ra.
Yeah,
Ra.
Time in the Rocks.
Right.
Yeah.
See, I think there's that moment, but see, and it might be, I don't know what comes next, and it could be what Samus said at the beginning of the end and the death is that there's nothing but war, right? It could be that's the whole construct of the game at the end of the day, and it comes into the story. Again, the intent, altruistic, really well intentioned. Execution, lots of problems throughout. And if
So think
everybody
about,
abandons you along the way, do you ever stop to question, wait a minute, am I going the right way?
well, pull yourself back though from just the Imperium. It's always been war in the galaxy. There before humanity, there was the Eldar. Before the Eldar, there was a
The
Necrotyr.
Eldar did nothing wrong.
Oh, the Eldar did plenty wrong. I disagree with you heartily. We can have a long conversation on that one. But the Emperor is really the humans in general are a young race in the galaxy, and the fact that they're in their relative period of war, but the amount of force they can bring to bear for being such a primitive culture comparative to some of the others, it's really astonishing, and it makes you think, yeah, the Emperor really does have something going on. Like he's to come that far that fast is impressive compared to like the orcs and the Eldar and all the others. And look at the Tau. The Tau are even younger race, but their development is half retarded. I mean, they're having a hard time getting anywhere but humanity, with all of the things that beset humanity, because the Emperor was there, their advantages they weigh, as they love to say in this one book, they punched far above their weight, right? So I find
I find it interesting you brought up the Tau, and I'll say this about that. I see the Tau as the other side of the coin of humanity. Humanity is what happens when you have an emperor. The Tau are kind of what happens when you don't have someone like the emperor. And the emperor himself, the reason I find that character so intriguing is because the old ones made him. The old ones made humanity so he would show up and become this, this weapon. So the thing that I find so intriguing about it is that the long plan that actually started back here, and this is the culmination of it, and I'm wondering where it goes.
That's what I was getting at. That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I give you that, and I give that the old ones created humanity to create the emperor to further their conquest of things. But even in that, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm supremely biased. But even in that, I see that there's an inherent problem of you've created a weapon and then somehow expected the weapon to come out differently than what it was.
I'll tell you what I think the biggest problem is, and this is where I differ with the Emperor. I don't like mankind. I don't like him. I think the Emperor should have, just, made his guys what he was going to do. The ones he knew were going to be straight and done his thing. Mankind, nah, I don't see anything really that fantastic about him, The orcs are funny. The Eldar, make some really pretty stuff. The
Tyranid are efficient.
The Tau look like manga, or anime. So they got that going for them. The humanity's just got a bunch of trains running around with people turning on each other, So I'm not as big a fan of humanity. I just like a lot of what the Emperor has created. I think that's pretty cool because I see that. Because of, like I said, I'm looking at the arc from the old ones on, and them looking forward and seeing, okay, we're going to lose this, so we're going to leave this lasting legacy that's going to bear fruit in however many billions of years after we're gone. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Now, see, that is a very Sean approach to something. Is that it's not necessarily subscribing to whatever the greater message is, but is there something, some sort of curiosity that's interesting to look at and study within the thing? And so that the custodians or the Primarchs or the Astartes or what have you, kind of the custodians being sort of the pinnacle of that aspect of things. My approach is I don't understand why everybody needs an emperor or some sort of king or some sort of leader of a thing. I would rather just be beholden to myself.
Well, see, that's what I'm wondering. That's what I'm wondering the culmination of what the answer is going to be. That's what I find so fascinating, is that the old ones decided there needs to be this answer, right? But we don't know what the question is yet that they were, putting this answer to. So I'm interested to see, and I don't think we'll ever get an answer ourselves, to be honest with you, because that's too complicated and too intricate for us to come up with as creative, beings ourselves. But I like the thought of that these beings who were so far above and so far beyond figured this is what we're going to do. This is our long-term plan. We're going to be gone, but we're going to leave this behind, as this ultimate weapon. And I don't know. I thought that was kind of a cool idea.
Now, Mark, I know you're an enormous fan of the Necrontyr, so I
So
assume
am
that you think,
I love that.
I know you, but I know Mark's really into the Necrons. I think you think that they were probably right. They were on the right track, right?
Yeah, this superior being comes along and is like, hey, we're gonna solve your humanity, we'll save you from this. They're like, great, stab that bastard in the back, and now we're in charge of everything, and you guys can just get off my lawn. So yeah, I kind of like where they're coming from.
There's a simple beauty in that.
Yeah,
this pyramid's
bunch
coming
of crotchety
down.
old men.
The Clint Eastwood Gran
right,
Torino of alien
Yeah.
species.
That's why I wanted to hear what you offer on it, because you're coming at it from the viewpoint of like, yeah, all these whippersnappers, they all need to go to hell.
That's right, these Johnny come latelys.
Yeah.
I think the real tragedy of the story, though, and I do think this is true of the Emperor, is that he's now a victim of his own creation, is now a prison of his own creation from which he can't escape, right? And humanity around him, and this is an undeniable point in my opinion, humanity around him is just going to collapse in on itself like a dying star. I mean, we can see what's happened in the millennia since, and it's just, I mean, it's nothing good.
Honestly, I hope they do, because I'm really sick of this is the grimdark, right? And I would like it to stay true to that. I really don't want it to have a happy ending. I want the Night King to win, and
they did it with the old world.
I really hope, rather than ending it with that happy note, they just keep kind of slowly plodding along with new pieces being added, and maybe this, maybe that, but never trying to give it that ending that they're never going to be able to write a satisfying.
Well, that's what they did with the old world. I mean, they sucked it all down into the pit with the one shining bright star left, right? So there's no reason why they wouldn't replicate that in their science fiction universe when they did it in their fantasy universe. They took it to the hilt on that one, and then they brought it all back as Age of Sigmar, which some people like, some people don't. But
I never really cared that much about Fantasy Battle anyway, but
well, no one in America did. Huh? No one in America did.
They didn't go into the history. Like the guys that started really digging into the history, by that time they were winding it down, right? Where they started talking about the history of the Empire and the history of chaos and that sort of stuff. Whereas here you've got a whole game system dedicated to just 10,000 years of one portion of the Imperium's history. And then another couple thousand years of the end, like where we're at right now, the current era.
I don't think Warhammer Fantasy Battle was ever meant to have this massive history. It was meant to be a sandbox to play in the same way that Dungeons & Dragons has the Forgotten Realms. That's just a place to go have your battles or have your D&D adventures. I don't care what happened in the Forgotten Realms 1,000 years ago or 300 years ago. I care what my characters
or yesterday.
Yeah, and like in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, you're like, oh, my dwarves are going to fight these Skaven. Cool. Where is it going to be? In the jungles? Is it going to be out on the plains? Is it going to be in like some rocky area? It's all terrain features. And yes, there was the Warhammer Fantasy Battle or Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay in the old world, and so they fleshed it out for that. But 40K is kind of a different animal from the history perspective, I've never really asked that of either my role playing game settings or my war game settings. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I kind of disagree, because the guys that started pushing forward the history of Warhammer,
Those guys aren't on this podcast, so
stop. So let me get to my point. The same guys that were doing that, like around the time of Mordheim was a good example. Mordheim, Thomas Pyramid and Andy Chambers and Jervis Johnson, those guys, they wanted to look into a period of history. Just follow my train of thought. Stay on the train. Don't jump off it. But those same guys also were writing for 40K. So the concepts that they were doing, this kind of shared history amongst the designers and developers, that idea got pushed into the 40K universe, and it just happened to take off better there. There was more scope available because it was a much more open place. It wasn't just one world, which is all you had in Warhammer, right? You had an infinite number of worlds. So you could tell an infinitely larger number of stories with the whole galaxy, right? And I think that the concept came from Warhammer in the beginning, but it really saw its fruition. It saw its ability to flourish in the 40K universe, in the bigger sandbox, right? And that's, I think that while you say that, it was never meant to, no, but if those ideas didn't get pushed along, that kind of shared creative universe within a company, as opposed to a shared creative universe amongst diverse individuals who aren't all working towards the same purpose. The same thing we were talking about with the Horus Heresy, with the writing, different individuals, focused purpose, right? I think that kind of got brought into 40K, and that's why 40K became so successful, and now why we are now seeing such a huge success with the Horus Heresy, because they went from, with 40K it was focused, and now they're kind of laser-like with the Horus Heresy, right? And now you're seeing that reflected back into the current storyline with things like Leviathan and the Dark Angels and things like that. The Lion. So I think it's that idea. I think it's something that's kind of unique to Games Workshop in general as the company that focus shared universe within one place, as opposed to having, like with D&D specifically, with D&D, like the Forgotten Realms. Forgotten Realms was Ed Greenwood's creation, but then you had all these different people coming in, like Gary Gygax and all these other people with different ideas, and it always was kind of, you could love one part of it and you could focus on one part of it, but you always noticed they always had like Dark Sun and Forgotten Realms and Greyhawk and Ravenloft, and they had to keep making new worlds. They couldn't just keep it all in one. And with 40K and Warhammer,
they could. They just wanted to sell new stuff.
I got it, but they're doing the same thing. They're selling new stuff. Like, look at us. We're buying new stuff all the time from Games Workshop, but the universe is still the same universe. They've never had to go to a new one. The only new universe they have ever had, like you could argue Warhammer and 40K are two separate universes. Like Age of Sigmar became a new universe, but the idea was always, well, Warhammer is the prehistory of the Warhammer 40K universe, right? That was the trope, But they've always kept it. It's always considered. It's not a different dimension. It's not. You don't have to planeswalk. You don't have to go anywhere. It's the same place. It's just at different points in history. I find that to be really interesting. Tolkien did the same thing with the Silmarillion, the Lord of the Rings, and the Hobbit. It's that same idea where it's slices of different history, but there's a huge story in one universe that they can just draw out and keep expanding on. I find it really, I think it's one of the keys to their success, honestly. I really do.
I do wonder, though, what are they going to do now that they've done some sort of definitive work with the Horus Heresy, right? I mean, the Horus Heresy has been a known quantity since the 90s, and now you've written a definitive series of books about it. What's going to be your next motivational story that keeps interest going?
That's the Indomitus era.
Yeah, Indominus era, because they've developed it. They're looking at, like, right now they're in the Segmentum Pacificus, right? The galaxy has gotten so big that they've divided it into like continents. So you got, the Segmentum Pacificus is where the focus is right now. We've still never even looked at the Segmentum Obscurus, which is the next one. If you look at it like a circular clock, they've kind of gone from 3 o'clock and now they're sort of at 9 o'clock. They haven't looked at anything from like 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock at all. That whole place is a mystery. There's been very little talk about what's been going on there. I wouldn't be surprised if the next major threat goes into the Segmentum Obscurus for the current timeline, but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, I'm excited about it because that's where the Flesh Tearers' homeworld is. They just identified that in the last map update. You never knew where Cretaceous was. Now you do. It's in the Segmentum Obscurus. And
Yeah.
strangely enough, they're talking about Ammit and that stuff in the Horus Heresy right now, which leads me to believe that there's going to be something happening, right? But who knows? You know?
That's his nickname, the Flesh Terror.
Yes, the
Mhm.
Flesh Terror, correct.
Yeah. So.
Good
Anywho.
times.
Give that book, a good solid 4.5 out of 5. Read it if you
K-Man.
haven't.
Pretty good K-Man.
Yeah,
All
Aaron
right.
Dembski Bowden, he does a great job. I like
Agreed.
his stuff a lot.
Very good author.
Yep, we are fans.
After
Well put. I
Yeah,
couldn't think of better
definitely.
words to close on.
Yeah, I know.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can't
I
top
don't think
that.
anybody can add anything to that. That's the
Nope.
cherry on top. Well done.
my mic has 5 bars.
Tell him to get rid of the bars. Its mouth is full. We can't hear anything. All right.
Are you
thank
still
you.
not hearing me at all? Really?
No,
Well, I
you
hear
cut
you
out
now.
every once in a while. Usually when you're making a salient point.
Yeah, I
something
know.
Important. Anytime you say something
Charm.
important.
The charm.
All right, boys. Well, thank you very much. And Kelly, hopefully next time Mark will have at least gotten to where you were 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
And
don't
we'll
count
be able to
on
get
it.
We'll be able to get some thoughts from him on that. But I'm eager to hear your thoughts on The End and the Death. There's a lot in that book. There's a lot in that book. And I'm really interested to see your take on that at the end.
It's very long.
It's the biggest of the series.
Are you doing it as the audiobook or are you reading it?
Yeah, audiobook. So it's like 18 hours.
It is, yeah. But I like the way he did it because it's broken up in those very short, 2-minute, 4-minute, 6-minute, sections and stuff. I thought that was pretty cool.
It's long. It's not. At least it's a better subject matter than like a Harry Potter book, which was also long and didn't really care to read them.
Anyway, hey, you know what? You may have your problems with the Emperor, but there's one thing you got to give him. He doesn't have a wand. Expelliarmus.
Noted.
That would be the best in the battle with Horus. Expelliarmus.
Offensive.
It was. All right. Thank you guys. I'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.